You see, 370 had become an emotional chord, not a practical chord.
Do you think that the approach of Government of India towards Jammu and Kashmir has changed immensely, or it has remained the same?
It's changed for the worse. I have no two opinions about it. You see, what was done 2 years back in August, that's not the way to go about it. जहाँ जाएं वहाँ तेरा फसाना छेड़ देते हैं, कोई महफिल हो तेरा रंग महफिल याद आता है. As a probationer, one didn't really see the society in Jammu and Kashmir. You were just there as part of the army, a civilian adjunct to the army. You never saw the society as a whole. But when I went there as chairman of the working group that was set up by Dr. Manmohan Singh, then I interacted with a very wide cross section and all areas of opinion.
So do you think all those things, the rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits, is it possible now after everything that has happened?
It has always been possible. Talk to a Kashmiri Pandit one-on-one and you will get that feeling. Talk to a Kashmiri from the valley, non-Pandit, and he will say that they were part of our face.
Needs to be reinforced in the current Muslim society that you are not a minority, you are the second majority in India.
It is a reality. Maulana was a man of perception, very far-sighted man. Unfortunately, the majority of Muslims don't think like that because they are too obsessed with their current difficulties.
Hello and welcome to Straight Line. Hamid Ansari, former Vice President of India, former permanent representative of India to the United Nations, former ambassador to various nations such as Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, a person who has also been Vice Chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University and has also been Chairman of National Minorities Commission in India. I have with me Hamid Ansari, and he has penned down all his life experiences in his book, Many a Happy Accident, Recollections of a Life. Today we will be talking about that book, his life experience, his connection to Jammu and Kashmir, and also the fact that he has been very vocal about minority rights in India. Welcome to Straight Line.
Thank you.
Firstly, regarding your book, Many a Happy Accident. So what were some of those happy accidents that have made you who you are today?
Well, I thought I had mentioned it. I started off by wanting to be an academic, very far from civil service. But my father prevailed and my professor prevailed. So I sat for the civil service examination. I even succeeded. I was appointed to because of my low ranking, I was appointed to the Indian Administrative Service. Because the Foreign Service is always the pick of the lot. And I was all set to go and get trained as an IAS officer. But then somebody higher up in the list dropped out. And I was asked if I would like to switch. And since I had indicated my preference for the Foreign Service, I found myself in Foreign Service. Accident number 1.
So you also talk about your childhood in that book, and you talk about like wanting to be an academician later on in life when you were in college and when you were in university. You know, when you were studying in school, what kind of dreams did you have then? Did you want to be an academician even then, or like other people have different kinds of dream of what they want to be when they grow up?
To be honest, my memory fades. I can invent an answer for you, but that will not be. I don't think as a child I ever worried about these things. I was more interested in doing what everybody does in school, which is to study and play.
So were you kind of a mischievous child, or because you belong to a family of scholars and intellectuals, the atmosphere was always serious?
No, for that you have to ask for the senior members of my family, those who are still alive, those who are not. They can't relate.
They don't tell you how you were as a child?
I'm told I was naughty, but I mean that's only an opinion.
Now talking about that one particular incident that you mentioned in your book, where you talk about a journey from Shimla to Delhi. a journey where your father did not accompany you and you would have been barely 10 years old at that time. Partition was happening. So what all do you recollect from that journey? Because the book just mentions it briefly in a few sentences. Do you have any vivid memories of that time, about that journey?
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate?
The start of that journey. You see, Shimla, like the rest of North India, particularly this part of North India, Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, Western UP, had its full share of the troubles of 1947. My father was in Shimla, he was a senior government servant. He had a choice, like other senior government servants, to opt this side or that side. He opted this side. But then Shimla was almost inundated of senior Muslim civil servants, because those who were there simply boarded a train and went across. We went through a bad time, had to leave our house, stay in a hotel. And even after that, things were not normal enough. So the family decided that family will not stay there. My father had to stay there. The family will go down to UP. But to travel to Delhi from Shimla was an exercise in itself. My father asked and was given a security detail. So the journey from Kalka to Delhi was performed in a first-class compartment, the old first-class compartments of the railway, in which the family was on 3 berths and 4 policemen was on the 4th berth. And we came through this part of Haryana and all that. It was crawling with refugees. It was a very heart-rending sight. I remember that. Because the train crawled through that period. It was not running like a normal train. Delhi was the same way. We stayed with a family friend, the late Mr. Rafi Ahmad Kidwai. His house itself was a bit of a refugee camp, so on and so forth.
Your father was also part of the Khilafat non-cooperation movement and he was jailed for 1 year. So what kind of impact did that have on your life, knowing that your father was part of the freedom struggle?
No, I wasn't born then.
Okay.
And I had no this thing. He had a different recollection of that period. No, it had no impact on me. I only read about it in the books.
But not even afterwards, did you have any conversation with him about that?
I did have a few conversations with him as a student. And I was short-shifted. You will not understand, there was a sentiment.
You have also mentioned about one incident in UP where he was arrested and then later he was released. But you have not specified about the details of that incident. Would you like to elaborate on that now?
No, it was some local agitation in the district. When the local police, as local police does, is to arrest people at random. So he was the eldest in the village. They arrested him. He had nothing to do with whatever the agitation was. Then when the then Chief Minister of UP, Pantji, got to know of it as to who he was, so he was released.
When he was released. About your college days, you shifted your subjects from science to arts.
Yes.
Was there any specific thing that prompted you to do that? Apart from the book that you mentioned, was there anything fascinating about art subject that made you want to switch subjects at that point in time when you were already in
No,
college?
I took physics, chemistry, mathematics, and I wasn't very happy with it. I mean, my school days were, I did well. The college, the 1 year of physics, chemistry, mathematics was all right. I passed my tests and the exams, but I wasn't very keen on it. And I discovered, and in the meantime, this other option surfaced out of the blue. And I opted for it. I got a dressing down from my parents that you don't think twice before wasting your parents' money. 1 year of college, this thing. But the father rector in St. Xavier's in Calcutta thought about it. And then later on he told me, he said, you made the right choice.
But generally, even today, when students think about shifting subjects, it's a very serious decision that they have to ponder on a lot about. So, did you take that time to yourself thinking whether I want to shift or not?
No, I was fascinated by the subject. I had read a book, I mentioned that there. I was fascinated by the subject, and I started studying it, and I was continued study. And to this day, I study the subject.
You're still fascinated by it?
Yes.
Regarding your Aligarh Muslim University days, you were an alumni and then you later went on to become the Vice Chancellor of the university. So how do you view that AMU connection, that the university that you were once a student of, later you went on to become the Vice Chancellor? First you had seen the student side of it and then you went on to see the administrative side of it.
It's very valuable to me to this day. In fact, last week I was invited to preside over a function which normally would have been held physically in New York, but it was finally held on Zoom with me sitting in this house and speaking. And you see, the Aligarh sentiment is a very powerful sentiment. I recited a couplet there, an old couplet, जहाँ जाएं वहाँ तेरा फसाना छेड़ देते हैं, कोई महफिल हो तेरा रंग महफिल याद आता है. So it leaves an imprint on you, and you carry it through life.
Was there something that you saw in Aligarh Muslim University as a student that you always wished that if I ever got a chance to change this, I would change it? And then you later became the Vice Chancellor. Were there something specific in your mind that you remembered? Because as a student you know that this is a flaw, that this is a flaw, that this is a flaw. And then when you became the Vice Chancellor, you had the opportunity to rectify those flaws.
No, when I have written about it, that when I went back there as Vice Chancellor, mentally, emotionally, it was a different place. You know. So I remembered the old days, but then everything had changed. From a university of 5,000 students, it had become a university of 20,000 students. So that was it.
Was it a change for the better or was it a change for the worse?
A bit of both. A bit of both.
And
It
what
had
about
become less personal, because you just could not do that with a bigger number.
And what about the current situation of Aligarh Muslim University?
Oh, it's all right. Like, it's no better, no worse than any other university, better than a good many other universities. It has its areas of excellence. It has its areas where normalcy or...
Your career as an IFS officer has also been very eventful. So you were in Afghanistan during the 1990s. What
1989,
90s. So what do you recall from that time? Because you mentioned in the book that there were bombings happening at that time.
Yeah, you see, that was the period when the Soviets were withdrawing. After 10 years after the invasion and occupation, the Soviets were finally convinced that it was a losing proposition. So the Americans were not keen to let them run away. So they dragged the negotiations for several years. But finally, a compromise was arrived at, and the Soviets withdrew. In fact, the other day when I was reading a news item, that the American withdrawal finally took place in the dead of night, with the Americans not being told that they are withdrawing, or rather the Afghans not being told that Americans are withdrawing. And I remembered what happened in February 1989, when the Soviets completed their withdrawal. And the last act of that withdrawal was the commanding Soviet general walking across a bridge which connects Afghanistan with Uzbekistan. He was the last to go. So there's a contrast between two ways of withdrawing, and this is not anybody who reads Afghan history knows that whoever has gone there has had to regret it.
So what kind of impact did it have on you to be in Afghanistan at that crucial point in time, knowing that it would be made part of history?
Very difficult to say. So much was happening all the time. There was concern about surviving physically. There was interest in what was going to happen, what the prognosis would be about the future.
Was it one of your toughest postings, or did you have...
It was a fascinating posting.
Fascinating.
Fascinating. It was a non-family station. I mean, the small number of embassies that were there, mainly from the communist bloc, China, communist bloc, India, Pakistan, Iran. This was the composition there. And since everybody was without a family, we would party every evening. But with the condition that the party had to end before 9 o'clock, because that was the curfew time.
What do you think about the current situation in Afghanistan? Are you keeping tabs on it, or?
I am and I am not. I have no responsibility, so I only read the newspaper.
Regarding your posting in Middle East, so do you have any interesting recollections from that time that just
I have
strike you
many
in mind?
recollections, and I have a very strong opinion about the term Middle East. It is Middle East to somebody who is sitting in London. India, from the word go, and the credit goes to Jawaharlal Nehru and his immediate circle of advisors, said for us it has to be a geographical expression. Therefore, it is western part of Asia, and we have always called it West Asia. Whether it is Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, it's all West Asia. To that we add North Africa. So Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt. And for us in the Foreign Office, the technical expression is WANA, West Asia, North Africa.
Any other striking recollections of that time?
Oh, there's too much of it. I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay, so how do you see the current diplomatic ties of India with Middle East? Are you aware of what is happening right now? Has the situation worsened, or it has gotten better from when you were there?
No, listen, the situation on the ground has worsened in many places, but our relations have remained steady because we consciously worked on a relationship which was not dependent on A being dependent on B being dependent on somebody else. It was India to that country, and it has worked well. They respect India, we respect them, it's all right.
Now talking about your Jammu and Kashmir connection, you were in J&K when you were a probationer as an IFS officer, and then your brother has also served in J&K, and then I found out that your wife has also been studied a little bit in Jammu and Kashmir. So do you have any experiences you would like to share about J&K?
Oh yes, each experience is independent of others. I went there as a Foreign Service probationer because all probationers have to spend time with an army unit. So I went there, my contingent, we were 4 or 5, was sent to Baramulla. We spent a few days there. That's all.
So you were also part of a working group regarding the confidence building measures of different sectors of society.
That was much later.
That was much later. So what difference did you see in Jammu and Kashmir of that time when you were there as a probationer, and the Jammu and Kashmir of that time when you were the chairman of the working group?
No, as a probationer, one didn't really see the society in Jammu and Kashmir. You were just there as part of the army, a civilian adjunct to the army. You never saw the society as a whole. But when I went there as chairman of the working group that was set up by Dr. Manmohan Singh, then I interacted with a very wide cross section and all areas of opinion, from extreme right to extreme left.
So from that time till today, do you think that the approach of Government of India towards Jammu and Kashmir has changed immensely, or it has remained the same?
I'm afraid I have my views. I don't want to unnecessarily burden you with it.
No, but because you mentioned in your book that the recommendations that were given by the working group at that time, you mentioned that they were not implemented immediately because of political reasons.
Yes,
that was part of
yes.
the book.
Well, I gave the recommendations in a detailed report to the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And a few days later, I met him somewhere and he said, I've read your report and it's a very good report, etc., etc. So my natural question was that Dr. Sahab implement it. And he stopped for a moment and said, Usme kuch problems hai. You know, he's a man of few words. So when he said, Usme kuch problems hai, I understood.
So that's why I ask you, do you think the approach today has changed, or even today J&K
It's changed for the worse. I have no two opinions about it. You see, what was done 2 years back in August, that's not the way to go about it. I don't know why the government, wise people, why did they go a particular way? More so because they had an excellent example of the views of the late Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. When he said, how will you approach the problem? So he said, Kashmiriyat ke saath. In other words, communicate with people. The present government decided otherwise. They imposed a solution. It has not worked.
Would you say it was also because of political reasons?
Must be. What else can it be?
So it was not an attempt to, solve what is generally being called the Kashmir issue.
It has not solved it. It's made it worse.
It's been made worse.
And made it very, very much worse.
So since you were part of that working group and you yourself mentioned that you got to interact with the society of Jammu and Kashmir very closely while you were working on that. So what do you think is going on in Jammu and Kashmir right now after everything that has happened? Because when you were there in 2006, situation was much different. And you still mentioned that regarding the rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits and the rehabilitation of surrendered militants, you gave some recommendations. So do you think all those things, the rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits, is it possible now after everything that has happened?
It has always been possible. Talk to a Kashmiri Pandit one-on-one and you will get that feeling. Talk to a Kashmiri from the valley, non-Pandit, and he will say that they were part of our face. So, no, that feeling is wrong. It was a wrong decision to evacuate the Pandits in 1990. And we have paid for what happened.
So do you think it is possible even now for that to happen, the rehabilitation?
I don't know now, because I think much water has flown down the river. This decision of August 2 years back has had a very bad impact. I mean, changing the status, doing away with the statehood, making it... these are all... People don't understand one thing. You see, 370 had become an emotional chord, not a practical chord. Because all the contents of 370 had been withered away. It had been integrated, whether it was Supreme Court, this, that, all the rest of it. But there was a sentiment that we are something special within the Union of India. And then suddenly you come and say, this doesn't exist. It's very bad, psychologically very bad, politically wrong.
Your experience in Jammu and Kashmir, did you have that first-hand experience of the Kashmiriyat, the hospitality that is talked about almost?
Oh yes, of course. It's a very unique kind of place. You see, Kashmir is physically the link between the Indian subcontinent and Central Asian countries. The distance from Kargil to Tajikistan is a walking distance. It's all right, today you can't travel on that road. But people were constantly coming and going. So much of the art and culture of Kashmir Valley has an influence of Central Asia. And vice versa. The late Mr. Jaswant Singh, he travelled there before he became a minister and all that. And he even written a book on it,
Now, talking about, since you were also the chairman of National Commission for Minorities and you've been very vocal about minority rights in India, so what do you think, that has the situation of minorities in India, has it deteriorated? Has it gotten better? Because the Sacha Committee laid bare the fact that minorities were never prioritized the way they should have been. That hasn't happened throughout the history. So, if it hadn't happened back then, is the situation now worse or is it the same?
You see, the point is, minorities are minorities within India. They are part of the citizen body. But they have been given certain special protection. Okay? Now, if the protection is there, is it being implemented? Not being implemented. And the Sacha report and innumerable other commentaries would testify to it that it has not been implemented.
So that has always been the case.
That's always become worse.
It has become worse.
It was worse. It was bad even in the Congress period. But it's become worse now.
Now it is deteriorated. Would you like to specify how?
No, the same thing is they are being made to feel you are other. You are not the same. That the difference is the other person is still an Indian. I communicate with you, you communicate with me. We are fellow Indians, isn't it? Nobody asks a question, which state you come from, which district you come from, what is your faith, what is not your faith, etc., etc. We all take it for granted. Whether a person from Chennai, a person from Kerala, a person from Maharashtra, all Indians. ठीक है, चलता है सब, ठीक है.
So is this a new phenomena where you are
It is a new phenomena. It is an attempt to homogenize, and it will not work in my opinion. India is too complex a place, too diverse a place. You see, you travel from Leh to Kanyakumari. Every 150 kilometers, food changes, dialect changes, clothing changes, everything. So you have to live with it. It's not something that is, sort of physically grafted. We've grown up with it.
But Ansari Saab, you also quote Maulana Abul Kalam Azad in your speeches. I've heard some of them. Wasn't he the one who said, if I'm not wrong, that Muslims of India need to stop looking at themselves as a minority and start looking at themselves as a second majority of our country? Do you think that that is one thing that needs to be reinforced in the current Muslim society, that you are not a minority, you are the second majority in India?
It is a reality. Maulana was a man of perception, very far-sighted man. Unfortunately, the majority of Muslims don't think like that because they are too obsessed with their current difficulties.
So do you think it is a game of perceptions that has created that feeling of otherness?
No, because of history. Because of history. You can't wish it away. You see, it is true that in 47-49 period, there was a lot of movement of people who came from West Punjab to Delhi and the rest part of India. People who went from here to Karachi and other places. Now, some people have got over it. Some people have not got over it.
So the wounds still remain?
Oh yes, the wounds remain. But the thing is not to, tease the wound every second day. The wound has to heal.
So since you are talking as former Vice President of India, someone who has remained an IFS officer, you've been, the Chairman of National Commission for Minorities. So do you think that when you talk about Muslims of India feeling insecure or feeling threatened or feeling that otherness, you're talking about those Muslims who are economically and socially vulnerable and not the Muslim elites? Or is it like same for everyone?
What is the meaning of elite and how many are there? Count them on fingers of one hand. It doesn't matter who the elite is, whether the Hindu elite or Muslim, Sikh elite. Elite is elite. Elite is not the issue. It is the rank and file of the people. The wage earner, the farmer, the chap who runs a shop in the bazaar. They are the ones who count. And it is the impact of policy on them which matters.
And that policy has not changed from the Congress regime to the BJP regime, you're saying?
In many ways, it has worsened. You see, the Congress did not make an effort to send a message that you are other. OTHER, written in capital letters. ठीक है, हाँ तुम भी हो यहाँ के, ठीक है, मगर तुम्हारे साथ थोड़ा ज्यादती भी कर लेंगे, ये कर लेंगे, वो कर लेंगे, मगर वो एक पॉइंट के आगे नहीं जाता था. अब now the attempt is कि no, because your religion is different, therefore you are other. You are not other. It makes no difference what your religion is or what it is not.
But I'm reminded that Hashimpura happened during 1987. And
I know that.
You were the one who, made efforts for the judicial reactivation of
I
that
tried.
case. And it took years for those families to get justice.
Exactly, because the mindset.
So that was there during the Congress regime, and today
Yes,
it is
it was.
more a game of perception.
Oh yes, I say that. It was there in the Congress period.
And today, do you think media has a role in it as well? That
Everybody
creating
has
that
a role in
feeling
it.
of-
Everybody has a role in it. The bureaucracy has a role in it. The political class has a role. All you have to do is to read. Innumerable books have been. We are an open society. Therefore, people write about these things.
And what do you think is the way out of it? To be the India that India should be?
To think of India as one integrated society, not a society which is in pockets. Just be Indian, that's all. You see, what is it being Indian? We have been given a set of principles which are there in a document called Constitution of India. Now that's a bulky document. Don't read all of it.
Summarized in the preamble.
Summarized in the preamble, and preamble is a very, very important, very carefully crafted document. 3-4 words there, nothing more. Justice, equality, fraternity. How? What do the words mean? Okay, justice, yes, we've all read some books or the other. Equality, all right, yes and no. Fraternity, how many people have ever thought about what fraternity means? There is a relationship which precedes the political or social relationship. But that relationship has to be sustained. That's all. My relationship with my brother, your relationship with your brother, sister, has to be sustained. That's all. This is what the effort of the constitution makers was. How else do you keep a society as big and as complex as India together?
And as heterogeneous as India.
It is heterogeneous, and yet it is something unique.
And now, on a lighter note, shifting to your book again. Are you fond of reading Urdu Shairi? Because
everybody reads a bit of Shairi all the time. Sometimes, you see, Urdu is one of those languages where a lot can be said in a couplet, which cannot be said in a paragraph.
since you're a writer as well, are you planning to try your hand at it as well? Some Urdu Shairi?
No, I'm not competent.
No. So what are your plans now after writing this autobiography? Are you working on another book, or do you have some other plans?
I am 84 years plus. I don't see any reason why I should do any more work. And as by God's will, I've been imprisoned in this rather comfortable house for the last 16 months. I'm all right, I've got used to it. I have my colleague here, he's the only person I see outside the family.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ansari, for giving us time. So there are people who inspire you, not with their words, but with the life that they have lived. One such person is Mr. Hamid Ansari, the second person after Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan to be re-elected as Vice President of India. We have talked about his book and about his Jammu and Kashmir connection and various aspects of his life. But if you want to find out more answers to the questions that you might have in your head, then you'll just have to read the book Many a Happy Accidents, Recollection of a Life.